Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome. My name is Hunter O'Haney, and I'm the director of the Stonewall National Museum and Archives here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And happy Veterans Day, everybody. Today is November 11th, 2020, and we're very happy to have everybody here. And we are in probably about the sixth or seventh month of a national pandemic, or it might actually be the ninth month now. And it's been something which, of course, has taken a huge toll on the country. And we're happy to be doing these talks and archiving them for audiences in the future and also for our current day audience. And we're very happy to have Suzanne Stroh here. Hello, Suzanne. Say hello.
Hey, Hunter. Good to see you again. Thanks for
Nice.
having me.
Yes, happy to have you here. Where are we finding you this evening?
Virginia. I'm in South Central Virginia getting rained on, which I guess you were getting rained on a couple days ago. So
Yeah, I think you have the storm that we had down here in Florida over the past weekend. You have it here now, or you have it there now. So
that's right. That's right. And I'm working remotely as an audio producer with a team up in Harvard, Massachusetts. So after it goes over me, it's going to dump on my partner. So we get a nice continuity of weather here.
Well, it's the one thing that actually kind of connects us in many different ways, and so it does keep us together. Just for those of you, if this is your first time at a Stonewall event, welcome. The Stonewall National Museum and Archives is located here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We have over 28,000 volumes in our library, and in our archive, we have 6 million pieces of paper that total 2,700 linear feet. It's one of the largest LGBTQ libraries in the world. We have really mostly from the 1950s to the present day, serials, publications, personal papers, ephemera, objects, and it's a wonderful trove for people who are interested in understanding what LGBTQ culture was like in the 20th century, and also for those of you who want a place to put your papers or your objects. As we say over and over again, don't throw stuff away, send it to us and let us throw it away. The important thing is always that we preserve the history that we actually have. History will be written by us and those that have come after us. And as many facts and as many things that we can put in their hands, the better it will be. So we ask you to please send your stuff to us. You can find out everything about Stonewall at stonewall-museum.org, which is our website. You can sign up to get events and newsletters from there. They only come out once a week. I'd like to say hello to my colleague, Emery Grant, who's behind the scenes here. Emery, I think just show yourself for a moment. Deputy Director at Stonewall, and just say hi to Emery here for a minute. I don't see him right now, but he'll pop up in a minute. And also just to let people know what's going on, we have 2 exhibitions up right now. One is called Elected Sisters, which is looking at trans, bi, and lesbian leaders, the first in many areas to be elected to public office. And so that exhibition is up right now at the library, as well as an exhibition called Life Letters, which are interchanges between parents and their children, between lovers, between unknown admirers, between people in jail. And so both of those exhibitions are really just beautiful, and they're all coming directly out of our archives. So if you're in South Florida, please stop by and see them. And we're open Monday through Friday, as well as Saturday hours now as well too. We have all of the COVID social distancing rules in place, and so stop by. And if you can't make it, then you can visit the exhibitions online again through our website. This exhibition, or this talk tonight, is being recorded and it will be posted on our website as well. So if you have friends who didn't get to see it, please feel free to let them know that they can see it as well too. And also I want to do a shout out to our friends on Facebook who will be here tonight as well. Happy to see all of you, and happy to have this conversation. So Suzanne, you and I met a while ago when I was at Leslie Lohman.
We did. We met up in New York when you were at Leslie Lohman, and I was working as an editor on the Romaine Brooks biography by Cassandra Langer, and had a great opportunity there to present on a panel. It was really great to meet you, and good to see you in your Florida garb. I think your hair is a little longer.
Yeah, my hair is a little longer these days. I don't quite know what to do with it, and but you know it's here, and so it's all that there is. So you know you have a wonderful background, but tell our audience just a little bit about your background, sort of a bit of your educational background for us.
Yeah. So I was trained as an art historian at Wellesley College and the University of Cambridge. And during the time when I was doing my university, I was writing. So I wanted to be an art historian who could make art, whether it was cinematic art or literature, with a deep base of understanding arts and culture. And I was a bit challenged in my professional progression because I'm the daughter of a quadriplegic, a guy who had a riding accident when I was 18 years old. I was the oldest of four kids. And so my career progression, it was by no means normal. And what I did was I set about building a hybrid career, half as a screenwriter and half as a curator of an art collection in Manhattan when I was young. And I progressed along both those tracks up until now, and it's led me down paths of making art, making literature, doing media productions, and also even some business. So,
And so, in your art making career, has it been mostly in the film area?
that's right. That's right. I have a feature film produced, which I made with Jamie Bruce and Lavinia Currier and Louis Sarno back in 2012. It was the only film ever shot in Central Africa Republic, and it was a dual language film, half written, half in French and half in English. I love doing that. But I started out my film career actually in the genre that I'm going to talk to you about today, working with Patricia Hodge and Nigel Nicholson on what eventually became the first 4-hour BBC Portrait of a Marriage drama. My role was story development and screenwriting in that. So, you know, at the heart of my work ever since I've been a little lesbian, growing up in the countryside in Michigan, has been a love for lesbian period drama. And pulling that together really brings together literature, film, and art history.
Yeah, it's so interesting, and I was. It's so interesting how we all have these different coming out stories and how we sort of understand ourselves as sort of little lesbians or little gay men and all that stuff. Yeah. I didn't give you this question before, but do you have just a brief coming out story for us?
Oh my goodness. Well, which one? Let me tell you the coming. Let me tell you the coming out story that's going to affect the show that I'm going to give you today. I had a great aunt who was completely ancient, but when I was a little girl,
she wasn't even as old as we are now, probably. But.
She was in her 80s when I went to visit her a couple, 2-3 times a week in the countryside and in town. She only spoke French to me, and she had a scandalous life as a spinster. And so by the time I was 9 years old, I knew everything about Miss Barney, who was my great aunt's great friend, and the reason why she had been recalled from Paris in the Belle Epoque to live out the rest of her life alone under her father's very stern iron fist in Michigan. But of course, this is the sweetest coming out story of all, Hunter, because, you know, every time we would sit down and have a cup of tea, my great aunt would read to me from you know, books of poetry or French literature. And she would tell me all about Miss Barney. I mean, Miss Barney was fantastic. She fenced, she rode, she drove carriages in the bois. There was Luxor in the moonlight. God only knows what she got up to, and I just loved it all. And at the end of my afternoons with my great aunt, she was very arthritic, and she would signal that it was time for the end of the meeting by pushing herself out of her chair. And she would say in French, "Mais il ne faut pas se comporter comme cette mademoiselle," which means, yeah, but just don't act the way Miss Barney acts. Well, I had no, you know, what do you mean? She's fantastic. What do you mean don't act like Miss Barney? So I think my first coming out, Hunter, was when I realized why I shouldn't act like Miss Barney.
That's really amazing. I was listening to an interview this afternoon with the soccer star Megan Rapinoe, And
She just got married. Shall we say congratulations?
Yes, we should.
I mean, no, got engaged, not married.
Yeah. She has a new biography out, but
yeah.
She was saying like she will be forever upset with her parents because she had to tell them that she was gay. She's like, hello, what's wrong with you? You knew I was gay. You knew I was a husband. You didn't say anything. But it's a whole different...
Was that what it was like for you? That was totally what it was like for me.
No, I think for me it was... my parents were very accepting, and so there was never any particular issue. I think I brought my first boyfriend home when I was 22 or 23 years old, and my parents were very nice, and it was very nice. But so let's talk about your, and also before we go here, just to let everybody know, we will be taking questions, and so please feel free to ask them. You should put them in the chat box or in the Q&A box here, and I see people beginning to put things here.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for your questions.
Yes, and so that's good. So Suzanne, let's talk about the project. Why don't you set it up a little bit for us here?
Well, great. You know, Hunter, I've got some nifty programming to take you through. So shall we move into a sort of the slideshow and media format, or do you just want to chat a little bit more before we jump in? Dig into that.
Just give us a little bit in the beginning so the audience understands.
Okay,
how
great.
You get to this project, what it's about, and also for me to put a plug out there that if people buy the audiobook, a portion of the proceeds will be going to Stonewall.
Absolutely. And we're going to mention that like about 7.5 times in the next hour. But it's really exciting to be here today and hear about your Life Letters exhibition, because what I'm here to talk about today is what amazing entertainment you can make when you have really rich archives that date before your collection, which kind of starts in the 1950s. So what I've done is I have kind of gone around the pretty much ironclad gatekeeping of a collapsing publishing world to produce an audiobook in an English translation that's going to bring a fantastic European storyteller to English readers for the first time. And this guy is, we'll talk about him in a second, but the author whose work I translated and whose audiobook I just produced is a specialist in taking archival material, personal papers, ephemera, and letters, and building wonderful biographies, and in this case, novels around historical figures. So I'm going to take you guys all the way back to Paris in 1926. If you ever have seen Woody Allen's Midnight in Paris, that's where we're headed, you know, plus 10,
Great.
Up to volume 11.
Well, let's go. I think everybody's anxious to hear about it.
Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to share the screen and get started here. Buckle up. Let's see. So again, let's see. Gotcha. So great to be with you guys. And let's dig in. So this is a talk about when queer culture ruled the world, and it wasn't yesterday. It was back in the 1920s. And so let me just play you a little clip to show you what it's like to make an audiobook about one of the greatest parties of 1926, attended by everyone who was anyone in Paris, mostly gay, lesbian, or bi.
This is Suzanne Stroh. We hope you've enjoyed this production of A Night at the Amazons by Francesco Rapazzini. Text copyright 2020 by Francesco Rapazzini. Translation copyright 2020 by Sally Hamilton and Suzanne Stroh. Production copyright 2020 by Suzanne Stroh. You can read the novel in French, available from the publisher Fayard, and on Amazon.fr. More from the pen of Natalie Barney and her circle is available in beautiful small editions published in French and Italian by Francesco Rapazzini under the imprint L'Amazone Retrouvée. This audiobook was produced in partnership with the Stonewall National Museum and Archives and made possible by the generosity of individuals, including the family members of Natalie Clifford Barney and her sister Laura. A portion of the proceeds from this audiobook go to the Stonewall National Museum and Archives for education and programming that benefit LGBTQ+ people worldwide. To learn more, visit stonewall-museum.org. This has been an original production of Legion Audio, recorded in Virginia and engineered at Tackle Room Productions, Harvard, Massachusetts. Produced and directed by Suzanne Stroh. Audio production by Caleb Green. Read by Suzanne Stroh. Music by Caleb Green. Sound design by Caleb Green and Suzanne Stroh. Artwork and cover design by Arnaud Franc. Reproduction or broadcast of this recording for any reason is prohibited without permission. For more information about how to share this audiobook, shoot us an email. theamazon@legiongrouparts.com.
So you can see that the level of production, that wasn't Woody Allen on the clarinet, but could have been. Can everybody see the slideshow again?
Yes.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Well, as Natalie Barney once said to Juna Barnes, and I'm telling you, it was a rough day for Juna when she told her this, when you want to be a star, you can't always choose your public. And the subject of this story I'm about to tell you is the American heiress, writer, and notorious lesbian seducer, NATALIE Clifford Barney. She was a star in her own time, and she's finally found her public because we are it. Our lives today, hers back in the 1920s, ours in the 2020s are so similar, you're not going to believe it. And this all came about when I began my quest to translate the work of Francesco Rapazzini. Francesco is a gay author. He's a biographer and a novelist. He's around my age, born in 1961 in Italy. He grew up halfway between, let me share the screen again. He grew up halfway between Venice, where he grew up in an extremely matriarchal family with lots and lots of lesbians in it and lots of gay people. And let's see, I can share it now. And half in Milano, where he was steeped in the world of fashion. And let's see if I can share this. Okay, here we go. So Francesco's, we'll start here. For Francesco, having people over to his house like Susan Sontag was completely normal because his aunt was a famous costume designer for films. She's there at the right, and her name was Bice Brichetto. And
roughly
and that's a picture of Sontag and Bice. It's interesting because Bice Brichetto is part of Susan Sontag's roman à clef. Almost nobody knows that this is the case, but one of her, I think it's her best novel, The Volcano Lover, was really a roman à clef about a three-way love affair that she had where Bice was her rival. And that was Francesco's aunt. He's written a book about her. This is called, you translate from Italian, it's Bice, a study. And you can see that Francesco Rapazzini is a publisher. He makes very beautiful small editions, which have extraordinarily beautiful reproductions of archival material, Hunter, ephemera, personal letters, drawings. But, you know, it's interesting because these beautiful books are only available to a small number of buyers who can afford them. And so he continues to make them out of his passion for the value of archival material. Here's a very little known photograph of one of Natalie Barney's lovers from the Belle Époque, Lucie de la Rue Mardrus. She's incredibly beautiful. But you can see here from the notation on the bottom left of this page that this photograph comes from a private collection, as it happens, the collection of Jean Chalon, one of Natalie Barney's best friends. And Francesco works regularly with archival material that all of us would die to have access to in creating his novels and his biographies. Here's, a letter written to Miss Barney. And he also has published through major publishing houses in France, very important work. When I read this book, Elisabeth de Gramont, a biography of a French Duchess who was one of the only communists in Paris, almost elected to be France's first female senator, I was hooked and I wanted to translate his work. And so I reached out to Francesco to translate, to meet him and to see if I could learn more about what he was up to. He came of age in Venice just before AIDS. So his voice is, one of these voices that I think we need to have more of in English. He's the award-winning author of 16 books in French and Italian. He speaks 4 languages, but he writes bilingually in French and Italian. And I really wanted to bring his work to English readers for the first time. And that meant recreating the lost world of Natalie Clifford Barney. She too was an expatriate writer, but she was born in 1876 in the United States. She came of age in Belle Epoque, Paris, just before darkness fell on Europe in the form of World War I. She was the author of 13 books in French and English. She was also bilingual and a bilingual writer. And she created a salon for cross-pollination of all the arts, using her incredible lesbian seductive abilities to bring together people from all age groups and all corners of the globe to gather together and talk about art, literature, music, and really to build the modern culture of Paris. And so I thought that I would show you some photographs of Natalie for a second, just to give you a sense of what her world was like. I'm going to go out of Francesco's here, and to also give you a sense of what a star she was. Here we go. This is our Dropbox. Natalie Clifford Barney was the first of 2 children. She had a sister, Laura, who was born after she was. And this is another rare photograph that is printed in one of Francesco Rapazzini's beautiful small editions. You can see her here with her in the garden with her mother, painter Alice Pike, and her father, Albert Barney. She was a precocious child. And as soon as she got to Paris, after she finished her schooling, she hit the ground running and went out to find the best influencer she could to promote herself as a writer and also as a seducer. This is he. His name is Remy de Gaumont. He was much older than she was. He fell madly in love with her and realized that she really was a lesbian who had no sexual interest in him whatsoever. But he immortalized her in a series of columns he wrote, which is kind of like as if you were writing letters in the New Yorker. And those were called Letters to an Amazon. And he was the one that gave Natalie Barney the name that stuck for good, the Amazon. She was at the center of a coterie of artists before World War I. Here you can see that she was caricatured and drawn all over the place. And here you see her in the period we're going to talk about today, in the 1920s, with the artist who drew that caricature, André Rouvert, a gay man who is part of our story today, and who taught her the tango, believe it or not. And she had a lot of incredible lovers, one after another after another. For those of you who might think that this is a picture of Vita Sackville West sitting down beneath an oak tree, reading some of her own poetry, no. This is the little-known Lucie de la Rue Madrus, just as beautiful, just as sexy, and even more prolific than Vita Sackville West. She was one of Natalie's early lovers. There's another picture of her, again published in one of Francesco's beautiful small editions. Eva Palmer, whose audiobook I just read for Princeton Audio, was famously one of Natalie's early lovers, as was the amazing lesbian poet Renée Vivien, who was an English woman of American ancestry who lived out most of her life in France, also writing bilingually in French. Now, Natalie Barney made an illegal secret lesbian marriage, Hunter, in 1919. She signed a marriage contract with this woman this is a portrait of her when she was a young girl. Her name was Elisabeth de Gramont. Everybody in her family was a duke when she was born. And she later became a marquise and a duchess by marriage, but was a lifelong communist, very politically active. We'll talk about that today. Romaine Brooks, also part of Natalie Barney's three-way marriage that we're going to hear a little bit about in the moments to come. There's another picture of Romaine, famous American painter who was doing figurative work in modernism when most people were doing abstractions. And finally, we finish up with a picture of Dolly Wilde, the potential homewrecker of this ménage, and we're going to learn more about today. So I'll stop this share and get back to the slideshow. Here we go. So, as Lucie de la Rue Maldru said of Natalie, you are the best looking thing the United States has ever exported. And now I'm going to show you a little bit about why Natalie Barney was so interesting when she was alive and still is pretty interesting to us today.
For Natalie, the best part of her love affair has always been the beginning.
Sorry, everyone.
The sweet, effortless desire of the beginning. Later, when the beginning becomes the past, Natalie will let go and allow herself to be loved, which is, after all, another way of loving. Natalie knows she has the lover's gift. She will consent to be loved.
I'm glad we got that sorted out.
Yes, wonderful, wonderful. It's so much better. Yeah.
Oh my God. So sorry. Let's just keep going then. Well, in order to bring the world of Francesco Rapazzini to English listeners, and he's done several biographies of gays, lesbians, transgendered people. He has written books about the flourishing of gay and lesbian culture. I think you can see here his book in French, Le Moulin Rouge en Folie, about how the Moulin Rouge inspired artists, and mostly gay and lesbian artists. It was necessary for me to figure out how to get his translations to English, to English audiences. Well, easier said than done, because the gatekeepers of works in translation have a lot of pretty daunting statistics to deal with. I mean, until now, the main goal of a translator has been print publication, but English language markets have collapsed for translations, and fewer than 5% of all the books published in the United States are in translation of any kind. And think about that. I mean, most of it is scientific material or medical books. There are a few prizes for translation, and the awards won't sustain independent scholars. So I started out with the aim of bringing the incredible story of Elisabeth de Gramont, look how thick this is, it's definitely a doorstop, to American readers, because her life was so dramatic and it was political as it was an adventure story and a love story and a story of the arts. But I was told that there wasn't enough of a market for a big biography like that. So Francesco suggested that I take on the translation of his first novel about Natalie Barney. And it's the perfect place to start because it's so much fun. It's you miss the beginning, but it's just like Woody Allen's Midnight in Paris. It imagines Natalie's 50th birthday party on Halloween night in 1926, and anybody who was everybody was there. The translation, the aim of our translation, which I made with Sally Hamilton, a great friend of mine, was to really recreate the internal voices of each character so that we could give them speaking parts for the first time. I mean, a lot of the people in this audiobook have never been on the stage. They've never been on the screen. And we really wanted to beef up their voices so that they could speak for themselves for the first time. And so finally, we settled on the idea of dramatizing the translation rather than publishing it. And we created an audiobook that has a really lush soundscape that takes you there and lets you eavesdrop like you're a fly on the wall at the best party of 1926. We're very lucky to be getting super flattering notices from important gay and lesbian influencers like James Conway, who has just tweeted A Year of Strange Flowers. And I don't know if, Hunter, if you have spent any time on his website, Strange Flowers, but you know, he's the influencer that everybody from costume designers to film producers, directors, and actors go to all the time when they want to understand the milieu of the bohemian. He's an expert in that, and we're very grateful that he likes this audiobook. And my goodness, every lesbian wishes that they could have somebody like Diana Suhami, if not Diana Suhami herself, tell them that their work about lesbians is hugely enjoyable. So super lucky about that.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So what's the guest list? This is the guest list. And when we have time for questions, I encourage people to ask me more about all of these people. But you'll see at the top that the birthday party that Natalie Barney threw for herself on 1926 on October 31st, Halloween, really started at the core was about her three-way marriage with Romaine Brooks and Elisabeth de Gramont. Let me tell you, all of her other lovers came. They were invited as well, and that they take up the rest of this list. And sparks definitely started to fly the minute people started to arrive. And let me tell you a little bit about that.
Our relationship is a farce. I have abandoned my solitude and my work all for you. I have forgotten them. I never regretted it. All my life I've only had two great friendships, you and D'Annunzio. And now, tonight, he'd rather be with a Polish woman who gives him cheap sex. And you've dropped me to go chase a rat. As far as D'Annunzio and Tamara de Lempicka are concerned, I have nothing to say. As for me, you know full well that even if I have known temptation, I've never been the prey of a temptress. Be honest, Nat, at least with me. Romaine wants to slap her.
So you can see, Hunter, sparks are flying in the salon as this birthday party starts to roll. And of course, why are they flying? It was the birthday present that Romaine Brooks brought for Natalie Barney, Dolly Wilde. Let's learn a bit about her. And this is, I think, her first speaking part in any dramatic role since Joan Shenkar made a play about Dolly Wilde several years ago, which didn't, I think it was off Broadway, and it didn't really get a Broadway stage.
Dolly turns her head slightly to see if Romaine Brooks is watching them by any chance. She's not only watching us, she's actually glaring at us. I pity her, but what can be done? This isn't my fault. Now I've missed something. Why did Natalie just say that her patience is great, but her impatience is greater? Darling, I don't understand what you're saying. I judge the seduction of a woman by the ease with which I can express myself in her presence. And? Dolly is now pressed against the wall to shield herself from Romaine's view. She is liking Natalie. She is proud to be courted by her. Dolly is used to pleasing others. In fact, that's all Dolly really does in life, since she doesn't work, isn't married, and is not an artist. But she does please men, who don't interest her at all, and women too, whom she would never want anyone to know have ended up in her bed. But this one's different. She's the Amazon. To be chosen by the Amazon is flattering in itself. Natalie answers, I would like to see you naked, so I can discover something about you that I don't like, so I can find something I can use if I need to stop loving you. And if you didn't find anything, I'd be lost.
So Oscar Wilde, I know, it's, this was 1926. And all of this dialogue was invented by Francesco Rapazzini from primary sources. So pretty steamy.
Yeah.
Here you can see Dolly Wilde in the constellation of other members of the party. And I just want to give you a sense of what was going on back in 1926 on the left bank of Paris. Look how similar it is to our lives today. We had a crash coming, an economic collapse. There are scenes of a lesbian marriage coming apart. There's gay sex. There's drug addiction, lesbian romance, polyamory, generational conflicts, consumerism, income inequality, hot politics over fascism and anti-Semitism, and tuberculosis that threatens to cut short the life of a brilliant gay man. And that's the guy that I want to focus on a bit right now. His name is René Crevel. He is the young star of this story. And let's see if we can go here. He's 26 years old. And in this clip, he's got a secret. And he's decided that he is going to maybe tell somebody about it. And we'll find out who he's going to tell if I can. Oh, by the way, before we do that, let me introduce René Crevel and Emery. Do you have our poll? We thought we would poll you. This was the most beautiful surrealist in the world. He was brought to this party in 1926 by his sponsor, Gertrude Stein. And the question is, who does he remind you of? And if somebody was going to play René Crevel today in a movie of his life, who would it be? So I'll leave that up while you can answer. And let me show you a couple of more photographs to give you a sense of who does that remind you of there? He certainly was pretty handsome. And finally, one of the most famous photographs. There he is. And let's listen to what's coming.
What a marvel. Do you see what I was saying? It's the Church of the Amazon. Dolly stretches out on the divan, where she adopts an outrageously lascivious pose. Make me yours. Oh, yes, make me yours. But first, give me a cigarette. René laughs and kneels down next to her. He lifts her hand and gives it a little lick with his tongue. Then suddenly he rubs it dry against the inside of his jacket, horrified. Consumption. Have you ever made love with a woman, René? Dolly's question is unexpected. Yes. And? No comment. What do you mean? I could take that as an insult. René laughs again, but this time he sounds a little embarrassed. What can I tell her? That it was a disaster? She wouldn't stop telling me to do this, put it there, let me turn over. What are you waiting for? It was torture. I like to make love with a man, that's all. For a woman, I can feel friendship, even admiration, but making love to a woman will always feel like an act of aggression. It's too unequal. It's incomplete. It doesn't belong to me.
So you can see, I mean, you know, when's the last time you read a novel set in 1926 with that kind of content? And you can see why it's been a passion of mine to bring Francesco's work to English readers. So, hello, 1926. You know, as much was going on then as is going on today. Global pandemics, global disruptions that involved giant migrations all over various continents, giving birth to modernism, whereas today we're giving birth or trying to sustainability. Sexual and gender fluidity, lesbian marriage and polyamory. Today we have marriage equality. Rise of authoritarian regimes, that's something we look out the window and see every day. And of course, feminism, which in Natalie Barney's time grew out of her own promotion of sapphism And today we have a new movement, Me Too, growing out of feminism. So the politics is something that is so fresh in this work, and something that I'm so excited for listeners to be able to experience for the first time. I can't see this, but as Natalie Barney, the feminist, said, when I look at him, I have a hard time believing in evolution. But take a look at some of the politics that the story brings to listeners, and see if this sounds familiar to you. Again, I'm trying to find the I think it's this one. Yes, here we go. René Clavel is in this scene as well. He turns up at the end.
I see perfectly clearly that you are a man of the right, if not a downright fascist. A man with no vision of the future. Someone who will never know what life can be like tomorrow because he is stuck in the past. You pine for life as it was 1,000 years ago. You're speaking in slogans. Try to using your head, unless you are simply incapable of dealing with subjects that are really for men. So there, Mr. Reactionary is back.
So there are lengthy political discussions about from people on the left and on the right. They're amply represented in the story, and it gets pretty hair-raising, some of their quarrels, let me tell you, dealing with issues like anti-Semitism and totalitarianism and so forth. So another thing that's so refreshing about this work, Hunter, is the fact that it also, with it has an upstairs downstairs structure. We're not only meeting the people who have come to Natalie Barney's party, but we're also meeting the people in the house who are working at the party. And we remind ourselves of what it was like in 1916 to have a domestic life that could possibly get you in trouble. And I bring this up because it'll wrap up our discussion tonight around how important it is for us to document even our domestic lives, as you said, with our ephemera and our personal papers. Because if we don't do that, erasure is around the corner. And this scene shows you how easily that can happen. Right now, we're going to see a scene watch a short video of a scene by Berthe Clerergue, who turned out to be Natalie Barney's incredibly loyal housekeeper of 50 years. But tonight was her first day on the job, and she had her hands full.
Berthe begins to rustle the silverware to attract Miss Barney's attention. If she asks me to come work for her, should I accept? Won't she want to take advantage of me and make me do weird things with her? Charles told me what goes on in this house. Good Lord! What was that word? Oh yes, lesbian. What was it he said? Look at that one over there who is playing the grand lady. She's nothing but a lesbian.
So, I mean, I think everybody who is GLBTQ has dealt with that at some point in their lives. And the important thing is one of the best ways we have to fight erasure is with public archives like yours. And so built on the bedrock of 20th century public and private archives, A Night at the Amazons is so perfectly imagined, it could be the truth itself. Archives are such a great place to go to create fantastic dramatic art. And here, in the production team of A Night at the Amazons, we're so proud to support what you guys are doing at Stonewall. So we just wanted to say thanks to everyone who helped make this project a reality. And especially thanks to you, Hunter, and our future partners at the Stonewall National Museum and Archives. Proceeds from this audiobook will go towards your education and programming. You can buy it on Audible and on iTunes, and I can furnish people with the links after this. And we're so happy to be supporting more awesome rainbow programs out of Fort Lauderdale. So on behalf of my partner, Caleb Green, in Studio B up in Massachusetts, and here in Studio A in Virginia, we just wanted to say this holiday season, please give a night at the Amazons. And now back to you. Back to you, Hunter.
Well, that was, thank you so much. That was such an amazing presentation. I learned so much during it. And so you, and also I want to thank you too for making Stonewall be a beneficiary of the proceeds from this. And as you say, it's a wonderful gift for people to make for each other or to each other, or also for themselves as well too. The similarities that you raised between what's going on today and what was happening 100 years ago are just astonishing. It's so wonderful that you found this work, which is so rich with these amazing artists and this salon culture at the time. I was listening to that and listening to you speak, and it made me somewhat jealous about thinking about the fact, why don't we live in those kind of worlds today?
Yeah.
Have we become too mainstream? There's a degree of exoticism to it that it felt so wonderful.
Well, let me answer. I can't answer for Francesco Rapazzini. It's well past midnight where he lives in Paris, but I know what he would say, and I think every translator knows their author pretty well. And he has spoken publicly about this many times, and he feels strongly about it. There isn't any secret sauce to it, Hunter. The fact is, we are becoming ghettoized. How often do we cross-pollinate? And how often do people who are really deep into the musical arts hang out with people who are into the visual arts? How often do we party together? How often do we exchange work? How often do we listen to one another? As a lot of musicians would say, when do we get into the living room with each other? NATALIE Barney was such a master at this. And so was Elisabeth de Gramont, her lifelong domestic partner, her wife. They were superb at bringing musicians together with painters, illustrators, poets, and challenging each other and whipping up all kinds of controversy, which they were not afraid to engage in. It allowed them to get to know one another at a deeper and more intimate level. So yeah, I'm jealous too, but it makes me try even harder to always broaden my circle of contacts. And I think that this is something as LGBTQ people that we can work on all the time, is getting to know each other across disciplines and not just ghettoizing ourselves or, going down rabbit holes in our lives, and making sure that we're getting, lots of influences and enriching one another.
I think that's a really good point. And, we're all probably somewhat guilty of it in the sense that we're now living in this somewhat golden age of sort of public acceptance of the LGBT world.
Yeah.
And so we've got success, but then we also are victims of that success as well, because there's a degree of specialness that has kind of gone away to some degree.
I forgot to mention athletes, since Megan Rapinoe was started off the thing. NATALIE Barney had many, many love affairs with professional athletes and tennis players, golfers, professional motorcyclists, auto racers were constantly showing up at these parties as well. In fact, in A Night at the Amazons, we have Thelma Wood, who, along with Dolly Wilde, was extremely good at driving race cars. Dolly Wilde even drove an ambulance into the line of fire in World War I. Gertrude Stein was essentially behind the lines of fire. So again, I think we can learn and listen to the audiobook. It's incredible. It will inspire you to go out and make sure that your next party has about, people who can bring 7 different disciplines to the conversation, whether it's a dinner party or just a gathering.
Yes, of course, that's when we can start having dinner parties together.
Exactly. But you live in Florida, where you could do all that outdoors and have social distancing even through the winter.
That's
true. Yeah.
So we have and so folks, if you have questions, now's the time to start posing them. We have a technical question here that Sandy has posed, which is, she says, great to hear.
Hey, Sandy.
In her first,
I can't see you, but good to know you're here.
How close to the real Romaine is this? And how do you know that?
What a great question. I think, let me start off by saying, and Sandy Langer is Romaine Brooks's 21st century biographer, for those of you who might be watching and don't know this. I think this is Romaine's first speaking part. And so I really wanted to take care to present her voice in a way that was authentic. I was very lucky back when I was working with Sandy Langer on her biography of Romaine Brooks to go to the archives at the Smithsonian Institutions and listen to her voice. But the only recording she ever made in her lifetime, Hunter, was in French. And she was doing an interview with Paul Morand, who was on the guest list at A Night at the Amazons. And she was talking about her drawings with Paul Morand in French. So I listened over and over and over again to that recording very, very carefully. And I had to translate in my mind as a voice actor how her voice speaking in English would have differed from her French speaking voice. What may surprise, I think, everybody listening here today and listening to the audiobook is that she had a very high, clear voice, which when you understand that she trained as a musician in her late teens and early 20s, shouldn't surprise you, because everyone said she had a beautiful soprano voice. But the clarity and the high pitch of her speaking voice was a little surprising to me. So I kind of pulled together an interpretation that mixed a little bit of Grace Kelly, because Romaine Brooks was from Philadelphia, with some other influences, and tried to come up with something that was clear as a bell, a little bit higher than my own speaking voice, much higher than Natalie's, and yet authoritative, because Romaine, from speaking with Jean Chalon, Natalie Barney's friend, I know, and so does Sandy Langer, we know how strong Romaine was. So we know that she had a high, clear, but very strong voice. Does that answer the question?
Oh, yes. No, it's very interesting. It was interesting hearing you speak, too, about listening to some of those recordings at the Smithsonian.
Yeah.
I always found it interesting that the Smithsonian ended up with such an amazing trove of Romaine Brooks's work.
That's right. And I would love to be invited, maybe alongside Sandy Langer, who is the expert in this. I would love to be invited in another conversation about that, because the drama of how Romaine Brooks's work made its way to the Smithsonian is a family drama, not just involving the three-way marriage of Barney, Brooks, and Gramont, which it did late. Well, Elizabeth de Gramont had died by the time that these decisions had to be made. But it was extremely clear when Natalie Barney and Romaine Brooks, who survived Lily de Gramont, had to make a decision in their 90s about where Romaine's paintings were going to go. They thought of the paintings, Hunter, as their children. And the portraits of Lily and Natalie and the self-portraits of Romaine as a sort of a triptych, a set in themselves. However, they did have family members in the United States, and they decided that to secure the safety of the paintings and their restoration, they would reach out to their American family members through Natalie's sister, Laura Barney. And it was through that connection that the paintings ultimately made their way to the Smithsonian. It's a wonderful story. It's gossipy in its own right, but let's leave that for another time.
Sure. But it's always so fascinating. I mean, each of these things, they're like layers, and you just
layers. I know.
Peel them apart, and you just find, oh, look, here's a little bit Bernice Abbott here, and here's little Romaine Brooks here, and it's
incredible. Bernice Abbott, of the people on this guest list, I think Bernice Abbott did about 5 portraits of them. Janet Flanders is perhaps the most famous, but one of those of René Crevel was also a Flanner portrait. An Abbott portrait. We could go down the rabbit hole there as well.
Yeah, it's interesting too. And I think what also I found very striking about this is how women at the time were thinking so much about the fact that they were living in a man's world. Sexism was just so rampant, and certainly white upper class men were controlling. If we think they're controlling things now, they just absolutely controlled everything 100 years ago at that time. But yet found this power to sort of get beyond a lot of that stuff and create their own communities and their relationships with each other. And it wasn't just personal relationships, although some of it certainly was, but it was a community that they created sort of inside this bubble of people who didn't take them particularly seriously in worldly ways.
Yeah, there's research being done right now by one of my colleagues, Julia Napoleone, working with University of Michigan professor Artemis Leontis, precisely into that issue. I mean, the Sapphic community, which was pretty much a girls-only club around the turn of the century, revolving around the work, the theatrical work that was written and produced by BARNEY to be performed in her garden, and Eva Palmer-Siclianos, and also René Vivien. That threesome really produced a bunch of theatrical productions. At one point, Mata Hari rode in naked on a horse, you know, performing one of her roles. This flowering of culture in Neuilly, which was really a Sapphic movement, girls-only movement, they allowed some guys in. Natalie used to play tennis with Ezra Pound, and he used to come by and look at the performances from time to time. Remy de Gourmont wanted to come to every single one of them and was kind of shut out. Liane de Pougy, who was the most famous courtesan in all of Europe, wanted to bring her clients from time to time. But mostly, you're right, it was a girls' world, and yet it was the flowering of lesbian culture, we think, of all of the 20th century. And the research done by Professor Leontis is soon to produce a book that's going to be about this flowering of culture right around the turn of the century. So they were able to find spaces to really not only just express themselves as artistic women, but to grow whole genres of work and to produce, you know, music, plays, dances, theatrical productions that, you know, essentially would, through reinterpretation, make their way to the big stage in Paris. Isadora Duncan, for example, was a huge star of the period, and she was very influenced by the work that was going on. It turns out that Isadora Duncan was the sister-in-law of Eva Palmer-Siclianos, Natalie Barney's first great love. Lots of cross-pollination. What happened in the garden at Neuilly didn't stay in the garden at Neuilly. It ended up, essentially, if we were to use if it were to be today, it would end up in the West End of London. It did end up in the West End of London, or on Broadway, or on the stages of Paris.
Yeah, and it's just, I think, to me, it's kind of reminding me of an important lesson about sometimes for marginalized portions of society, and how you can be so obvious under the guise of somebody who is in some other place. And so the fact that women had so much power between themselves, even though society didn't deal with them equally or fairly, they were able, not that they embraced the situation that they were in, certainly, but they were able to turn it to something which was to their own cultural and human benefit. And so I think about applying those lessons to us today, about how marginalized communities think about a lot of these things now. And there's this great desire for assimilation, but sometimes being on the outside does really give you the opportunity to pursue things that you wouldn't really be able to pursue if you had been fully assimilated.
I love the whole question of when is it the time to assimilate and when is it the time to sort of, you know, retreat and recharge. You know, these are cycles in GLBTQ life that persist today. And Natalie Barney lived a long life. She lived into her 90s, well into her 90s, and still was taking lovers into her 90s. So she lived through many of these cycles. And she had many periods when she was, the period of this audiobook, 1926, was one of her periods of really broadening and including more men in her salons. But then later in life, she decided again to go through a phase of retrenchment. And that was the period in which she tried once again to promote and was successful in promoting women to be nominated as members of the very exclusive Académie Française. And it was through the efforts of Natalie Barney that Marguerite Yourcenar ultimately was elected, I believe, as the first woman member of the Academy.
Wow. Well, it's a reminder to all of us that, as much as we wish to be accepted, there are some advantages to be on the outside of mainstream society as well. Well, Suzanne, it's so great to see you. It's wonderful to catch up. We've come to the end of our hour here. And so thank you for all of you for joining us this evening. I'm Hunter Ohanian, the director of the Stonewall National Museum and Archives here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We do these talks every week from 6:30 to 7:30. Tonight's talk has been recorded, and so if you know someone who's interested, they can look it up either on Facebook or on our website at stonewall-museum.org. I want to do a big shout out to Emery Grant, who is our Deputy Director. Emery, time for your reveal now. There you are. Thank you for all your backstage work there, Emery. And everybody just stay safe. And if you know a Secretary of State in some state out there, tell them the election was not rigged. So for another night, so long, everybody. Suzanne, great to see you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Bye, everyone.
Bye.